It was around September when I was just looking for a temporary job. Nothing fancy, didn't care what I got. I was still in high school and just wanted some cash of my own. I applied everywhere I could think of, from grocery stores to arcades. I'll admit, I might have focused on places that seemed easy or fun to work at. But the search was wearing me down, and the sun was starting to set, stretching shadows longer as evening approached. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I cut through the old, abandoned mall to save some time. People always whispered about the place, stories of strange occurrences, flickering lights, and eerie sounds. I never believed any of it. To me, it was just an empty, forgotten building. But tonight, as I walked through, something felt off. The air was heavy, and the sound of my footsteps echoed unnaturally through the hollow corridors. As I passed through the desolate halls, I noticed something strange, a store that hadn't been there before. A Halloween shop, of all things, sitting right in the middle of a dead mall. During the Halloween season, it's not unusual for pop-up shops to appear, but this one felt different. The neon sign above flickered weakly, casting an eerie orange glow over the entrance. The Halloween hut, 'tis the season to dress your worst, it read, the letters peeling and worn. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door. The inside smelled faintly of dust and something sweet but strange, like decaying flowers. Costumes lined the walls, creepy, old-fashioned ones that seemed like they hadn't been touched in years. I approached the counter, where a man sat, his expression blank but his eyes oddly intense. There was something unsettling about him, but I shrugged it off. When I asked if they were hiring, he nodded, barely saying a word, and handed me an application. 2 weeks later, I was sitting behind that very counter, scrolling through my phone, killing time between the rare customers who wandered in. My shifts were mostly quiet, though the atmosphere always felt strange. The air was unnaturally cold, and the costumes hanging from the racks seemed to watch me. Every now and then, I thought I heard faint whispers, but I told myself it was just my imagination. The dim lighting flickered constantly, casting shadows that danced across the floor, and it was starting to get to me. One weekend, a woman and her 2 children came into the store. The mother looked exhausted, her eyes heavy as she pulled her kids along. They asked where the children's costumes were, and I pointed them to the back of the store, where the shadows seemed darker than anywhere else. After they disappeared into the aisles, I remembered something strange, the one rule my boss had given me: no one was allowed to try on the costumes. He never explained why, but he was adamant about it. Feeling uneasy, I left the counter to find them, the hair on the back of my neck standing up as I moved deeper into the store. The lights flickered again, and I could hear something, a low growl, maybe? My heart raced as I turned the corner, and what I saw stopped me cold. The mother was lying on the floor, completely still, and one of the children, a boy, no older than 8, was standing over her. But something was wrong. His costume had changed him. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and his hands looked more like claws. It was like the costume had fused with him, turning him into something else. He turned to look at me, his expression twisted with something animalistic. I stumbled backward as the shadows seemed to close in around us. Before I could react, something invisible pushed me off my feet, throwing me across the store. I hit the ground hard, gasping, as I saw another figure, a woman in a witch's costume, standing over me, her face hidden in shadow. She pointed a gnarled wand at me, and suddenly, the room felt ice cold. The boy creature moved closer, his eyes locked on me, but I managed to pull myself up and dart past them, crashing through the door and sprinting into the night. I didn't stop running until I was home, my heart still pounding, my mind reeling from what I had seen. I called the police, but when they arrived at the mall, the store was gone. Not just closed, there was no trace of it. The space where the Halloween hut had been was empty, as though it had never existed. No one believed me, of course. My family insisted that the stress of the job hunt and a dog bite, yes, I had been bitten, but that wasn't what I remembered, had caused me to hallucinate. But I knew better. Days later, as I walked through town, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The Halloween hut had reappeared, this time next to the old movie theater. The same neon sign flickered above the door, and a father and his daughter were just walking out. The little girl was clutching a spider costume, her face beaming with excitement. I wanted to warn them, but my voice caught in my throat. I could only watch as they disappeared down the street. From that moment on, I felt like something was following me. At night, I would dream of the store, its aisles stretching on forever, the costumes moving and whispering as I wandered, lost. The bite on my shoulder wasn't healing either. It seemed to be getting worse, darkening around the edges, and sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I thought I saw something else staring back at me, something with glowing eyes and twisted features. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling only grew stronger. The bite throbbed, and strange things started happening. My senses became sharper, my reflexes quicker, but with that came a creeping fear that I was changing. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was wrong. The nightmares became more vivid, more intense, and every time I woke up, I felt less like myself. Desperate for answers, I returned to the mall. In the daylight, it looked like it always had, abandoned and empty. But the sense of dread was overwhelming. I walked the same path I had taken that night, searching for any sign of the store, but there was nothing. The air was thick and still, and the shadows seemed to move, even though there was no one there. Just as I was about to leave, an old man appeared out of nowhere. He looked ragged, like he had been living in the shadows for far too long. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "The store, it's not what you think. It moves. It changes. And once it gets its claws into you, it won't let go." I tried to ask him what he meant, but he disappeared as quickly as he had come, leaving me alone with the suffocating weight of my fear. I knew he was right. The store had marked me somehow, and whatever was happening to me wasn't just in my head. I could feel it, something dark and twisted growing inside me. Days passed, and the bite continued to spread. My reflection looked wrong, like something else was staring back at me. My dreams grew worse, filled with the flickering lights of the Halloween hut, the costumes whispering to me, pulling me deeper into the nightmare. I was becoming something else, something I couldn't control. One evening, as I walked past the movie theater, I saw it again. The Halloween hut. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow on the sidewalk. The pull was stronger now, like a thread tugging at me, urging me to go inside. I tried to resist, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the store. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The store had changed. The aisles seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and winding like a maze. The costumes moved slightly, swaying as though alive, their hollow eyes following me as I walked. The manager stood behind the counter, smiling that same unsettling smile. "Welcome back," he said softly. "You've been chosen." I wanted to run, but I couldn't. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. The costumes moved closer, their forms shifting and warping. I could feel it then, the change. The bite on my shoulder throbbed, and a darkness spread through me. I was becoming one of them, and there was no escape. The Halloween hut would move again, to another town, another unsuspecting soul lured inside. But for me, the nightmare was just beginning.